Trust me, you're going to want to stick around all the way to the end of this episode. I promise you it's going to be worth it. Not only do I have Ryan Payton on here to talk about his memories of the Dreamcast, but also Shenmue 1, Shenmue 2, and some fantastic information about Shenmue 3. And he also did a Q&A with Yu Suzuki himself. So great information coming up right now on Back in My Play. Hello, welcome back to Back in My Play. My name is Kevin Larrabee, and we are continuing the Summer of Dreamcast, and I am so excited to get on the show Ryan Payton of Camouflage. Ryan, how you doing?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, this is the wonders of the internet where just Twitter, finding out that you wanted to talk about the Sega Dreamcast, and oddly enough, I've been following you from all the way back. It was probably like an 8.4 show when you were still with Kojima Productions, and
right, probably.
And following you along through there, going to 343, and now you have launched Camouflage with Republique, which is now on physical edition on PlayStation 4. If you guys want to go pick it up, it's also available on iPad for you mobile folks as well.
Yeah, I think we shipped on 6 platforms.
Wow. Well, I was just out in Japan, and I saw there was huge store end caps for the game as well. So you guys had a huge launch in Japan too.
Yeah, Gung Ho did a great job promoting it over here. Well, by the way, I'm recording this in Japan at the moment. I don't live here, but I'm just here on business, and yeah, they did a great job promoting the game. So that was a lot of fun.
But we're gonna go way back in time because this is all about the Dreamcast, and we have tons of special things to talk about. But I really want to start this show just talking about your history with the console and what really your main memories are of it.
Yeah, no, the console has a very special place in my heart. Probably my most beloved console looking back. And it's funny listening to your show. I have similar stories, and to what you went through, and what JJ went through, and what Greg went through. I was in college when it came out. Just like JJ, I skipped school the day on September 9th. But mine didn't go as smoothly as his experience did, because it seems like his parents are really supportive of his decision to
right.
take a day off and buy a console and play it all day. For me, I was going to school up in Tacoma, Washington, and which is about 2.5 hours north of where my folks live in Portland. I had reserved the console at an electronic boutique in Portland many months ago, before I even went to school. And so I figured, I can maybe drive down there on the 9th. I'll save money on tax because there's no sales tax in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And so I just skipped school that day. But my father, who still to this day is a salesman who kind of drives around all over the state. Funny enough, he was on I-5 South at the same time I was, and he saw me racing by at 75 miles an hour going south at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Perfect.
And this is before everybody had cell phones. And so I had no idea that my dad was on the highway as I'm driving down, skipping school, going by on a Dreamcast. And somehow I forgot how I got in contact with him. And while I was down there or something, I can't remember how he found out, but I got a message from him I know where you are or something. And so I just fessed up, and I actually came by the house after I picked up the Dreamcast, and had dinner with my folks, and I plugged in the Dreamcast for the first time. I had Soul Calibur, and they were just kind of rolling their eyes over the whole thing. But they did say, I remember them commenting on how real life-like everything looked, and it's just a really funny memory of skipping school and actually playing it at home with my folks.
Well, that's what it was. Soul Calibur was the big showpiece title for that, where the graphics were something that we had never seen in a home console up until that point. Yeah,
exactly. So that was kind of a cool moment for me, and then my obsession with the console went to in all sorts of directions. In fact, at one point I thought I was going to write a book about the history of Dreamcast. I was interviewing some folks like Mike Fisher from Sega, but yeah, that never ended up materializing. But this just shows the extent that I was obsessed with that thing.
Is that something you would ever want to maybe pick back up down the road? Because it seems like, if anything, the community and the fandom of the Dreamcast and the love of the Dreamcast is just growing.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought the same thing, Kevin. And then just in preparation for your show, I went and I found my old transcript of the first draft of the book, and I thought, oh my God, nobody was going to do this. This is embarrassing. Yeah, and then I guess throughout the whole Dreamcast era, I was just consuming as much content and buying as many games as I could, and I was just so into it. But one of the other, I guess, the biggest memories for me that I had was towards the end of the life cycle. You already kind of talked about how piracy really took over, and as a somewhat poor college student, I remember going up driving up to Vancouver, BC, and there was like a game shop, but it wasn't like a real game shop, like a normal one. It was like a pirated game shop that had no signage. And I remember how I found this place, and I would go there, every couple of months, and I would pick up games that normally I wouldn't buy, mostly imports. And I had a pretty solid policy about it. For games like Phantasy Star or Quake, I would buy the $50 game, but I'd go up there and I would try out stuff like the stuff I just didn't think was worth maybe $50, like the 18-wheel trucker game. I can't remember what it was called. But I remember one time I showed up there because I got a T-shirt somehow from Sega, maybe from buying like the keyboard or something. And I showed up there one day with my Sega Dreamcast T-shirt on, and the guy freaked out, closed all of his books, was hiding everything. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? What's going on? He's like, do you work for Sega? And I'm like, no, of course not. And they said, oh, okay, cool. So I'll show you what I have. And so I unfortunately, I feel like I kind of contributed to the downfall of that console because of the rampant piracy and everything.
I think we were all doing our part to the point where I bought a used Dreamcast. I've been going through just the craziness of checking out all the revisions and stuff like that. So I found a cheap Dreamcast on eBay, and not mentioned in the listing, but included in the box were a bunch of burnt pirated games.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's
so
unfortunate.
Bonus.
Man. Yeah.
It is really unfortunate. And there's still people out there that are still making use of Disc Juggler, but doing it for better purposes. There's a huge indie community that's now supporting the Dreamcast and homebrew stuff, which is a little bit, grayish area, but you want to go play some...
now I figure it's okay because you go on eBay and you buy a real copy of it's Crazy Taxi, and Sega's not going to see any money to that. So
yeah, it's really tough to figure out what is the best way to support these games as someone. I mean, we had we're going to talk about Shenmue in a little bit, but the idea of wanting to continue to support these Sega franchises that really lived for the most part on the Dreamcast. Some kind of made the transition to the original Xbox with Jet Set Radio Future, but how do we tell Sega that we would love to have these games updated or at least brought over to the current generation of consoles so we can continue these franchises and not just have them sit on the the IP shelf like Shenmue did for so many years. Right.
I mean, I feel like the best way we could send our messages is by buying those Dreamcast ports and that they release every once in a while, and then yes, I don't think there's a better way for the community to show how much they love the Dreamcast of that era than what happened with the Shenmue Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a piece in I think, actually, surprised I have it in front of me, May 11th, 2016, Sega Europe community manager Dan Sheridan stated that Sega would, quote, love to release HD ports of Shenmue and Shenmue 2, and we're investigating how to make it a reality. So they must be hearing something. So
yeah, no, of course. Yeah, the Shenmue community is extremely vocal, so I'm sure they hear it all the time.
Just make sure if you're going to do it through social media, just keep it positive, folks. So let's just make sure we're not threatening anyone's lives to get a port, like you said, 18-wheel trucker on Xbox exactly. One or something like that. But outside of the launch, what are the games that really? I don't want to ask you for. I mean, unless you have it, your top 5 Dreamcast games. What were the games that really were vital for your love of that console?
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of sketched up a top 5 list.
Love it.
And I won't go deep into the stuff that you guys already talked about, but one obviously is Shenmue 2, which we'll be talking about a lot in this show. And then we have Phantasy Star Online, like Mark McDonald, like JJ. huge game, huge influence for me. And as a big Destiny fan, I could see just how influential that game was to so many people. NFL 2K1 was a game I put in so many hours. But and then the other one that you and Greg had talked about quite a bit was Virtual Tennis.
Yes,
which I absolutely adore, and I think it's a really amazing, really solid game. And then finally, to round out my list, which is a game that hasn't been talked about too much, is actually Crazy Taxi. Which I don't know if you got too much into that, Kevin.
Hey, you talk. I have a copy of Crazy Taxi right next to me, and I actually popped it in a couple days ago because I was maybe mentioning in one of the episodes saying, maybe Crazy Taxi doesn't hold up super well in 2016, but yeah, it does. If you want to pop it in and it's like in the rotation, like pop it in and bring some people to KFC, bring people to the Levi's store. You can totally have some fun doing it. Yeah. Like all these outlets that no longer exist in 2016. If you want to go back in time and
listen to the Offspring,
listen to Bad Religion, Offspring, like you can get a great idea of what 1999 was like for us in America.
Right.
Or at least through the eyes of like Japanese developers.
Through the eyes of the Japanese, correct. So yeah, for me in that game, I was, like I mentioned, when the Dreamcast came out, I was in college. And so that was a game that came out a little bit after launch. And it was a game that took over my dorm at least. And we had a couple guys who had Dreamcast, so they'd come over to my room and play it. And we'd write our high scores up on like one of the communal like whiteboards in the dorm. And that was just a really great memory. It's before a lot of like online leaderboards. And it was just it was a game I was obsessed with. I was constantly trying to improve my score, which for people who know me, it's very unlike the type of games I normally play. I'm not really big fighting game fan. I'm not really big action game fan. I mostly like things with stories. Surprise, surprise. But for whatever reason, I got really hooked on Crazy Taxi, and just for those who got really into the game, there's actually like this technique. It's kind of like the equivalent of like the claw technique for Monster Hunter, but you have to kind of like do this weird trick with your left hand and the controller to try to time these like different brake plus acceleration, and it gives you these boosts. And just doing that over and over and over again for runs that can take a half an hour, 45 minutes, or just destroy your hand, but it was all worth it.
Geez, I never thought to relate it to the claw technique of Monster Hunter on the PSV, but yeah, that's actually a pretty good analogy. And to the credit of the developers in Japan, KFC, as you know, is still gigantic in Japan, and maybe like one of the few Tower Records stores. Like every time I'm in Shibuya, I'm always walking by the Tower Records. It's still there at least. So maybe they, in terms of, I don't know, I haven't seen a Fila store in Japan, but they at least had those two locked down for Japan in 2016, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, from their perspective, like these are like the big franchises. They must have said that we got to have these,
Got to have the KFC. Have you
have the KFC? Got to have Kentucky.
Have you done the Christmas, or I guess it would be Christmas Day KFC order?
I've never done it, and I hope I never do it. But you probably should tune your listeners in. I'm curious if you know how that all came about too.
No, I just heard it like secondhand from friends in Japan.
All right, so friends in Japan will hear this, and maybe they'll correct me if I'm misinterpreting some of this. But from what I know, anybody who spends time in Japan, especially around Christmas Day, it's all about buying Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's not about buying a turkey. It's about lining up. You can reserve it in advance, and it's this huge thing. They have lines around the block at all these KFCs all across the country.
Pre-order your KFC early.
Yeah, isn't that insane? And I read an article about it maybe 5-6 years ago that it's just kind of a brilliant marketing move. One of these expats from America was here in Japan many years ago, many decades ago, right as Japan is trying to become more westernized, and they're trying to figure out a way to boost sales of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And they ran this TV ad that basically said Christmas equals KFC. And this is around the time that the Japanese are trying to understand more about the West, and they just interpreted that as truth. Wow. And they thought, everybody in America, on Christmas Day, they just go out and buy KFC. So I guess that's what we're going to do too. And it became this huge national phenomenon that still continues to this day, even though it's complete BS. So,
wow.
It's really, really funny how marketing can be so strong, when done at the right time, with the right people,
Well, I'm just happy to have my picture with the Christmas edition of the Colonel. It was, I think it was in like Akihabara or something like that, where I got my arm around him and had that picture somewhere in my iPhotos cloud or something. Yeah, I do treasure it. Absolutely. Fun fact about Crazy Taxi, and this is when I was doing, I don't think I mentioned the other shows, but doing like research for this stuff. Like Richard Donner, like of Lethal Weapon, was supposed to make a Crazy Taxi movie. But then,
I kind of vaguely remember that, seeing that on Dreamcast.ign.com.
Yeah. Keep it locked to Dreamcast.ign.com in case he wants to, come back on that project.
Come back to it, right? Yeah, that's good.
Okay, outside of those, are there any big ones? Were there any? I mean, obviously, you're spending a lot of time in Japan. Was any of your love for Japan influenced by the games of the Dreamcast at that time?
That's a really good question. I remember being here during the launch of or around the time of the launch of the Dreamcast. I didn't buy one because it was pretty expensive. I was just really into the PlayStation 1 at the time, buying all these games that I really wanted. So I've done those kind of pilgrimages that you've done as well, where you go to Akihabara and spend just an insane amount of money on games that you don't really need. But for the Dreamcast, it was, I know I keep bringing it back to Shenmue, but that was the game that it came at the perfect crossroads in my life. When I had really lucky. I went to a high school that actually had a Japanese class you can take to fulfill your foreign language commitment.
Wow.
And so, I studied Japanese, for 2.5 years in high school. And then when I went to college, I continued to study some Japanese. And so it was right around that time when Shenmue came out in Japan, and I had imported it using my modded Dreamcast. And I had played the whole game through in Japanese. For the first time ever doing that, I had previously imported other titles, like for other consoles, like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, and tried to play them in Japanese. Like a lot of folks who end up working over here, they'll like John Ricciardi and things like that. Those guys like that will have done that. But Shenmue was the game that I could finally get through the whole game. I was just so committed to it. And I think it has something to do with the fact that of all the voiceovers, right? Which was a big deal back then. It was that the game was fully voiceovered, and I could understand, I could hear what they're saying in it. So I didn't have to just rely on how much kanji can I remember? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't even know. What was the voice acting good in Shenmue and Shenmue 2? Because I've been playing through 2, the European release, so the voices are in Japanese, and I think the voice acting is actually really good. Or maybe it's just because I don't understand Japanese. No,
I think that we should probably find a real Japanese person and
right.
and ask them. But for the definitive answer, but yes, from my perspective, I think that, especially for the time, I think the Japanese voice acting is actually quite good. Whereas we all know about the English voice acting is just unbelievably bad. The translation, localization, everything about it was very poor. But yeah, so playing it, in Japanese, I thought was it just felt like a movie, and I didn't feel like it was very silly at all. And just doing some research now, just getting ready for your show, I kind of watched some more playthroughs of Shenmue 1 and 2 in Japanese, and it's so much better in Japanese, isn't it?
I mean, I feel bad crapping on the poor voice actors that had to do Shenmue 1, especially like the children in Shenmue 1 in English sound like they're from hell.
Yes. Yeah, the poor children in a lot of games, they end up sounding really weird, like in Heavy Rain, with those French accents. But yeah, and I'd like to think that, the voice actors aren't to blame, right? Is that they probably didn't have much of a very good director.
Right.
The script, oh my God, done very poorly from a localization perspective. So, but yeah, it's much preferred to play it in Japanese, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Shenmue 1, because that might be the game of the console for me. Maybe it will be Shenmue 2 by the time that I make it through that much more epic extended journey. But for you, was it really the characters? Was it the setting? Was it the story? Was it just the whole package? What made Shenmue 1 so special for you?
Yeah, well, I think looking back, and even today, when you're really excited about a game and you're looking forward to it, that's sometimes that's half of the fun, is even before the game comes out and learning about it and seeing the trailers and trying to, get yourself ready for it. So for me and for Shenmue in particular, I just remember reading through the official Dreamcast magazine and then the IGN sites and just hearing about first these rumors of this Virtual Fighter RPG, and that's what really kicked things off for me. I mean, that sounded awesome because again, not as a hardcore fighting game fan, and it was more of a guy who likes stories, really into Metal Gear Solid. Wow, that sounds perfect. I'm so excited for that. So just following what they end up calling Project Berkeley, spelled miscorrectly, by the way, from Yu Suzuki, and just following anything and everything I could about it, including this promotional disc that came out before even the release of the game called What's Shenmue. I don't know if you've looked at that or you've heard about that.
No, was that part of the official Dreamcast magazine?
Oh, this is a release only in Japan.
Whoa.
It was a disc that, it was the actual title of the disc and the packaging was called What's Shenmue. And this is a way for them to do like it was a pre-order bonus. And they also, I think they included it in a Famitsu magazine. But I guess the logic behind it was because the game was delayed. They had like a demo disc to kind of whet the appetite of users, and it came out about 6 months before the actual release of the game. And it's a very short demo, but it has a totally unique scenario that involves the former CEO of Sega, Yukawa, which you guys have talked.
No way.
Where he's like on the packaging and all that kind of stuff, and he's even on the packaging on the front of this What's Shenmue, which is all about finding Yukawa-san in this world of Yokosuka, right?
That is awesome. I have to find this. I have to find. Okay, perfect. There's a video. There's a complete video playthrough of the. Oh my god! I had no.
Yeah, and I think
idea
this one
about
on
this.
YouTube. It's probably one of the first entries. It's actually it's already been translated in English by some fans. So even though it never came out outside of Japan.
Whoa! This is at the hot dog stand and everything.
Oh yeah, Tom's there. He's speaking really kind of insultingly bad Japanese with a huge American accent that I can't even understand.
Oh no!
But
so I can't remember if I put in my US copy a while ago, but I can't remember if I'm looking at this video right now and there's Coca-Cola branding on the vending machines in the Japanese version, but those aren't in the US version, right?
I want to say that they are, but yeah, but you know what? I can't say because I don't know if I ever played the English version of Shenmue. I only played the Japanese version, so I do remember the Coke machines from that. But maybe they were in the US version. Yeah,
this is the great thing of stalling on podcasts on the internet, where I can take a look at YouTube videos. I've been doing like some looking at the fan community behind Shenmue and people that have gone through. Yeah, wow. I mean, they don't have the Coca-Cola brand in the US version. Wow.
Oh, no kidding.
Because I know that was a big kind of hurdle for the people that did want to get those HD re-releases, that you have to then relicense all that stuff, which sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you picked up the Shenmue vinyls that were released?
Oh. No, I haven't.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, hopefully those are still available, but that's something that you're going to definitely want to throw in there. Yeah, I'm looking at this video, and it just says Cola on it. That's
okay, interesting that they didn't get the license.
No, I'm going to need to pick up a copy of the Japanese version of Shenmue now. I want to try.
No, you're going to have to, yeah.
It's a perfect reason to spend 100 yen in a shop next time I'm in Japan. You
know what? So just a couple of days ago, I was in Akihabara and looking to drop an absurd amount of money on this very rare Japanese PS1 title.
What were you looking at?
I don't even want to say, but it's like because it's $300.
Oh no!
Thankfully, I didn't do it. I sat there and I thought about it for a few minutes. But just in preparation, I went and checked to see what the prices were in Mandrake over at Akihabara and for Shenmue 1 and 2. And Shenmue 1 was about 3,000 yen, about $30, and then Shenmue 2 was about, I want to say it was 5,000.
Whoa! The prices are going up a ton.
Yeah.
Last time I was there, they were like like rows in the trader store for like 200 or 300 yen, like tons of copies.
Yeah, maybe Trader has it for way cheaper, but at Mandrake, which is a pretty reputable,
absolutely great prices.
Yeah, so I was surprised.
Oh, maybe that is just I mean, we saw it here in the States when it came to just used copies of the game, of Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2 on eBay, which prices have just really skyrocketed since the announcement of Shenmue 3. But I guess that makes sense. Japan should be excited as well. It's going to be
I'd like to think that it has something. The announcement of Shenmue 3 has something to do with the Japanese maybe. Going back and trying to replay the series. But I'm curious for you, Kevin, what is your memories like leading up to the launch of Shenmue? Did you buy it at launch, or were you following it very closely?
It was Dreamcast. Dreamcast magazine had obviously the demo disc that we got every other month or whatever it was, and there was a trailer for that, and every single issue. It was every issue. It was almost like their Ocarina of Time for Nintendo Power, because every single issue there were more screenshots, there were more people saying like, this is going to be the most epic adventure that you'll ever go on. And that's when I really started getting interested in Japan, because it was a world that I had never seen outside of like movies. And even for movies, there weren't like a lot of movies that were taking place in Japan or in Tokyo for me as a 12-year-old at the time. So I really just love the look. And this is a weird thing about me, Ryan. Like one of my favorite things about Japan are the vending machines.
Oh yeah, it's one of the best things, that's for sure.
And
the convenience stores, right?
And it's the vending machines, it's the convenience stores. It's like it's almost and I've never found a good way to articulate this, but it's almost the appreciation of all the stuff that I love that people don't really appreciate here in the States, if that makes any sense.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So that was the big thing. And as soon as I saw that video, like if a game just had incredible visuals or graphics, like that was something that would be a must purchase for me, like Resident Evil Code Veronica. Same idea. Right. It looked better than anything I had ever seen on a home console at that time. So I had to buy it. So I ended up trading in, like it was probably, I traded in something to get a copy of Shenmue. I don't know what it was, but I ended up picking it up, and unfortunately I got stuck at a certain point, and then the PlayStation 2 came out and my friend down the street got that. So
oh no, and that was all over downhill from there for Shenmue.
Well, yeah, because I was so easily influenced by the guy that worked at EB Games, because he would say, "Oh well,
is it the same guy? Why do you about like, oh no, like the PS2 is like bombing hardcore in Japan."
It was the same exact thing, but in reverse, because that's when, and it was when the stories started coming out of Dreamcast or Sega of America calling it quits on the Dreamcast hardware. So I was like, I don't want to bet on a horse that's not going to win this race. I'm going to go to the PlayStation 2, and then eventually it was not even the PlayStation 2, but I ended up getting an Xbox, because for me. And a big selling point was it was kind of the successor of the Dreamcast, and I know it was going to have the franchises that I wanted to play on it. Yeah.
No, it's true, and so that's interesting. So, do you remember how far into Shenmue you got before?
It's somewhere in the second disc, and by the time that I played through it again completely a couple of years ago, I realized I was so close to the end. I was so close. I was like maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to the end.
Kidding.
But again, after going through and replaying it, and I still believe that it holds up incredibly well, and it's something that you can't really experience in other games. Even the stuff that does seem like bad mechanics, like having to just wait outside of a restaurant until it opens to ask a guy a question.
Exactly.
Because where else can you get that?
So I don't know if Kevin, if you want to kind of tease some of the fun stuff we're going to do at the end of the show to.
Absolutely. Okay, so what we'll do right now is I know we'll definitely end up talking. I do want to talk to you about Shenmue 2 a little bit, because I want to continue to refuel myself to play through that, because right now I am just going to my job and I'm moving boxes to the left and to the right a lot. And
Yep.
I'm going to awesome temples and checking that stuff out. But what we're going to do, and seriously, thank you so much to Ryan for helping make this happen, or actually for doing it himself, is you got to talk to Yu Suzuki about Shenmue, which is crazy. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, so yeah, I had offered to Kevin and to your listeners that, you know, if you're interested, you know, because I see Yu Suzuki every 2 months or so, because I'm helping out with the Shenmue 3 project, and I run their advisory board meetings. And so I told him, I told Kevin that, you know, next time I'm in Japan, I'm more than happy to ask him a few questions, you know, some of my old burning questions about Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2 and I'll just bring the answers. I'll kind of reinterpret them on the air for your show at the end of the show. So it'd be good so I definitely want to have your listeners stick around to the end, because I'll sprinkle in a couple of those things as we're getting deeper and deeper into the games. But I do have some really kind of fun anecdotes that I got out of him a couple of days ago.
Awesome. And even extra huge bonus for the Patreon supporters, because you guys are really why I've been able to continue to do this show on a weekly basis and set aside all the time to put this stuff together. There are going to be some exclusive answers from the Q&A as well for those Patreon supporters. So extra special thank you from Ryan and myself. So let's talk a little bit about Shenmue 2, because Shenmue 1, of course, came out in the States, and I was actually talking with Tom from, I don't love the name of the website, but the Dreamcast Junkyard, one of the bigger fan sites for the Dreamcast today, and how, you know, Shenmue 2 only came out in Europe in English until it eventually got ported to the original Xbox. So did you end up importing Shenmue 2? Is that something that you made sure you got that and your boot disc ready to go?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was day one purchase. I believe I bought it online, maybe from EB Games. And I know you guys had talked about this in a previous show, that they actually end up selling the EU version or the European version in the stores, the brick and mortar stores in the States, which I thought was amazing that they ended up doing that. Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, like EB Games was not a bad place to get some import stuff towards the end of the life of, like, I bought a bunch of import Virtual Boy games from EB Games at one point.
Yeah, they weren't kind of like the monolithic, you know, brick and mortar store that they are now. In fact, when it comes to the Dreamcast, I have very fond memories of EB. Like I mentioned, I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but on launch day, you know, that's where I bought my Dreamcast, where I bought Soul Calibur, and I also bought, which is insane, I also bought Final Fantasy VIII for the PlayStation 1, because that came out on the same day. I don't know if people don't remember this.
I forget which was positioned first, but I kind of remember in the history of it being that Sony positioned Final Fantasy VIII to go up against the Dreamcast to make people think, all right, don't get the Dreamcast, just here, go play a Final Fantasy game.
That's interesting. It makes a lot of sense. And if you go back, I wish I could remember, maybe if you put in your show notes, there's a video online that any Shenmue fan should watch. It's in Japanese. I think it's an NHK documentary on leading up to the launch of Shenmue in Japan. And it has all of this incredible footage of the making of the game and Yu Suzuki at the height of his power, where he's got 200, 300 people working on this project. And then he's in this smoky, like, Bond villain lair looking room where he's got this big monitor, and he's got like 30 people in this room who are not working on the game. They're just sitting around waiting for his feedback. And he's going, fix this. What are you doing? No, that's terrible. You know, he's just, you know, got like God tier inside of Sega at this point. And one of the shots that they have that's really incredible is they are all gathered around a TV playing Final Fantasy VIII, which had just come out in Japan. And they were meticulously like going through it and looking and seeing what they were doing from like a CG perspective. And that must have been, I mean, I wish I could have been in the room at that time. But yeah, it's kind of funny that he ended up having to go toe to toe with that game for the launch in America, because they came out on the same day.
I found this, and it's an hour long.
Yes, it's totally worth it. Even if you can't understand Japanese, just watch it. The footage is unbelievable. And one of the things I will talk about at the end of the show is going to be what Yu Suzuki's most outstanding memory when it comes to this pre-launch event that they did in Yokohama, which they have a ton of footage from this video, where he kind of he'll talk a little bit about what he remembers specifically about that. But yeah, there's so much money being spent, so much hype around this title.
This is just incredible to see him at the front of like a boardroom table, just chilling out, smoking, just making decisions.
Telling people like they're wrong about this and this and this, and we got to do this better and we got to do this better. He was so driven; it was unbelievable. And Ed Freeze from Microsoft makes an appearance. This is pre-Xbox, where they're starting to get ready to, and they're trying to get Yu Suzuki to get warmed up to the idea of working on Xbox potentially. It's really amazing.
Oh wow, yeah, there he is. Wow. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because I really want to watch this.
No, this is all good stuff.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, maybe we should start sprinkling in some of the Q&A stuff now, because I feel like, this is definitely going to be a Shenmue heavy episode. And I mean, I'm looking at my list of about 3 games that I really cannot wait for, and right at the top is Shenmue 3.
Okay. So you want to talk about Shenmue 3 and how that came to be, maybe?
Hell yes. Okay,
cool. Yeah, so the story goes is that, as your listeners now can tell, I'm really into Shenmue. It was a really seminal game for me growing up. Especially
can I ask you what's it like to now be working on this franchise? Like, I want to ask you this, because it must be like somewhat surreal, even though that you've worked on all these gigantic franchises in your career, to now also be a part of Shenmue 3.
Yeah, I mean, I just live a really charmed life. That's all I can really say. I feel incredibly lucky, and I remember I've had down times in my life, like everybody's had down times in their lives. Mm-hmm. But I've always been just so focused on this industry and these games that I love, and trying to contribute in a positive manner and try to be a positive person. So, and that my biggest break obviously was working on the sequel to the sequel, or to the sequel, my favorite video game of all time, being able to work on Metal Gear Solid 4.
Yes.
And that was like my big break in the industry. And there's, plenty of shows about that and that interesting story. And then moving on and becoming creative director in Halo 4, mm-hmm. Another huge franchise, really big franchise for me. And then since then, it's more about just what can I offer these friends or these people in the industry that I can help out. Mm-hmm. Whether they're indie developers or whether they're these titans of video game history like Yu Suzuki. And I just remember after we had done our Kickstarter for our game Republic, I remember thinking, talking to my good friend Mark McDonald at A4, what are just the last remaining games that will hit Kickstarter? This is around Kickstarter so big, mm-hmm. and we're thinking about all these these bucket list games that everybody wants. Like, okay, Half-Life 3. Valve doesn't need the money, so
right.
you're not going to see a Half-Life 3 Kickstarter. This is before Mark would end up working with Inafune-san on Mighty Number 9, and so we're just kind of checking off all these lists. And I'm thinking to myself, man, the game that would break Kickstarter, that would just take all and win and make the world record for the biggest video game Kickstarter would definitely be Shenmue 3. And I just went through my network and tracked down his email address, Yu Suzuki, and I cold emailed him and said, I can help you make Shenmue 3. And
well, no shit.
Yeah. And he wrote me back and said, how? Who are you and how? and I told him, hey, I gave him a little background. I said, well, I would love to talk to you, whether on the phone or in person. And I think this is around the time, I'm starting to forget, but I think this is around the time, it's like 3 years ago, mm-hmm. maybe even 4, where he was going to be at GDC to accept like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And so we planned to meet at GDC in San Francisco. He decided to take an extra few days to meet with me. So we just hung out in a hotel lobby, a little bit off the beaten path from GDC. And he brought his computer. He brought all of his files from all of his time at Sega post Shenmue 2, where he's in kind of like this limbo where he's not able to work on much stuff. And he's had all these game concepts, and he's got all the script for Shenmue, the whole thing. He just walks me through the whole thing for like a whole day. Mm-hmm. He says, this is all I have, Ryan. Like, he doesn't really know who I am, but he's like, this is what I have. Yeah, I would love to make Shenmue, but how we do this? And I'm explaining to him what Kickstarter is. I'm explaining to him what Unreal is and what Unity is and what a PlayStation 4, this is pre-PlayStation 4, what a PlayStation Vita is, explained to him what's going on, what has been going on in the industry for the past 12 years that you've been out of the game. It was just incredible. This eventually would lead to him coming to Seattle and him sitting on my couch in my home, and me loading up Heavy Rain, A Wolf Among Us, Destiny, and GTA 5 to walk him through. Here are the games that he had influenced so heavily.
Yes.
And also here's Destiny, an example of like how here's an example of like a game that spent so much money that is kind of reminiscent of all the rumors going around about Shenmue, about how much money you spent on Shenmue. And just, can you imagine just, being a huge fan of his and him sitting on my couch, like, drinking like a Diet Coke, playing video games with me, and I'm explaining to him what's going on with the game industry. What is going on here? This is like a crazy parallel universe.
I mean, I can't even imagine, as someone that has owned multiple Outrun arcade machines and has continued to play his games throughout my life, and going back to the ones that I miss, and how much he has influenced every single game and like multiple genres in the industry. It's just fantastical.
Right. And just going out to lunch with him, asking about things. But the perspective I took with him was really no different than what I took when I was working with Hideo Kojima, which is, I have a lot of respect for these individuals, but I don't worship them.
Right.
And I don't do what a lot of other people do. It's like, hey, can you autograph this, or whatever you want, sir, kind of thing. Like, I stick to my guns. So Yu Suzuki and I, we've had some pretty brutal moments where we went toe to toe, and I told him exactly what I thought he was doing wrong, and he told me why I thought I was wrong. And this is when we're starting to get ready for the Kickstarter and working with Mark McDonald. And the poor 8-4 guys are at a dinner where I'm pretty close to just yelling at him inside of this Italian restaurant in Shibuya about, this is what the fans want. Why don't you understand this? And he's like, no, this is what the game is. This is what I want to try to do. And we're just going toe to toe, a lot of tension, but it was all for the right purpose. And I think that's the thing that that's why we've become such good friends, is that he understands that I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing this to get my name attached. It's even in my contract with him that you don't have to put my name on anything. I don't care. All I want is for him to complete his career in a way that he can look back and be really proud of what he did, what he's created, and all these amazing games that you'd mentioned. The Shenmue franchise for him, and especially if you think about it from a Japanese perspective, I know it must eat away at him, because he had just had so many successes after another. And then to end his career at Sega which has mostly been considered like a failure of a game, especially from a financial perspective. Right. And then not being able to complete this thing that he started must just eat away at him. And I know it does. And so what I want to do is help this guy who did such a great thing with the industry, and help him, finish this series. Now, that being said, he's already talking about, if that Shenmue 3 is successful, maybe there'll be a Shenmue 4. I'm like, oh man, okay, well, here we go again. But that's what he wants to do, and I'll be there supporting him no matter what.
Well, that's outstanding to hear, because a couple things. First, clearly the Kickstarter was an enormous success. The Kickstarter itself broke records, past $6 million in terms of funding, and this game and he and you and the team has to have a ton of pressure and a ton of just unbelievable, I guess the best word is pressure, because there are so many people that expect this game to be just everything that they've ever dreamed of for the last 14 years.
Right. Yeah, no, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, what he's trying to do. And and the thing that that I can tell you, which is the absolute truth, is this guy, I felt like I haven't watched a lot of Rocky movies, but I'm assuming that a lot of the later Rocky movies are about guys trying to get this old boxer back out of retirement and back into the ring.
It's pretty accurate.
I felt that way with him up until the Kickstarter, or a little bit before the Kickstarter, and now he is all in. He's sleeping at the office. His wife barely sees him. He is so dedicated to this, and it just warms my heart when I come into the office and just see his passion, that he's coming back and he's doing this thing that he set off to do so many years ago. And yeah, the pressure's there, but I think he and I, one of the first things I did for the board meeting is I made sure that we all understand what the goal is, and I remind everybody what the goal is every single time we have a meeting, which is this game is for the fans. Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to do what Shenmue did before, which is revolutionize the industry in a lot of ways. Even though people didn't know it was revolutionizing the industry, it was so forward thinking. Mm-hmm. That's not what Shenmue 3 needs to be. We don't have the budget, that's what the fans want either. They want to see the story continue.
Exactly.
And so that is what we're focused on. And as long as we execute on that, I feel like that I'm at least hoping that the fans will appreciate it. And we're keeping a close eye on other Kickstarter projects like that Mighty Number 9 that didn't work out as well. Mm-hmm. And that's at the top of his mind. He's aware of it, and he knows that he can't repeat those kind of same mistakes. Great.
I mean, like I said, it's one of my most anticipated games, and it is that hearing that story of him getting, like, I don't even want to call it like a second chance, but we hear too many of these stories in, the Japanese business world and development where, you kind of make one mistake and you get the corner office, or you get the, get an office with a nice view outside the window, and you have to sit there until your contract is up, and that's it.
It's funny you mentioned corner office. Now that I think about it, I haven't connected these two dots too much. I must have told him this when I met him, though, but that to a much smaller degree, I know what he has gone through, because I was wooed by Microsoft and relocated to go to Microsoft, become a 28-year-old creative director on Halo 4, which I had no business doing. And for 2 years, like, I think, doing a good job on the creative perspective, but just doing a really poor job, I think, working internally at Microsoft and what they were expecting out of me. And I was demoted in front of a lot of people that I had hired. It was incredibly embarrassing. And I was given a corner office for a year, just to kind of just like help me get ready for my next step of my career, because I was done. And That was so embarrassing. And so I'd like to think, I can't remember if I did this or not, but I'd like to think that that's how I kind of talked to him about, hey, I understand what it's like to, get all excited about something and think that you're doing something really great, and then for it not to pan out, and I think that's something that everybody goes through in their lives, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe, how old are you now?
I'm 35.
Wow. It seems like it's odd how for me, podcasting has kind of connected like parts of my life. I remember where I was living at an apartment for about a month before I left because of terrible situations where I think I heard you on 8.4 talking about that that situation, which is kind of like crazy that's flashing back to me right now.
Oh, this is a small industry. It's so fun, right? Everything's interconnected.
But I guess, Shenmue 3 is obviously a gigantic project, but so were the first two. I'm kind of curious. Were there any thoughts that you got about the development of the first couple games that really stood out to you?
In terms of talking about it?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I had a bunch of questions. So for me, as a fan, one of the things that has always got me, and I got really interested, and I always want to know more about, was the Sega Saturn version of Shenmue.
Yeah.
And again, if you go on YouTube, it's one of the first things that pops up. There's this comparison video that shows all the footage that they have of the Sega Saturn version that never came out, obviously. And so just a couple of days ago, I'd asked him about it. I'm like, what do you remember about the Sega Saturn version? And he doesn't remember a lot, in fact. I was so disappointed. And I used to harp on about this all the time. I said, as one of the biggest stretch goals for the Kickstarter, we should have like somehow you could re-release it on Steam or something like that and get the code. And he doesn't know where it is. And it's just the Sega Saturn version. I'm going to just for the fans and for my own curiosity, I'm going to continue to prod and poke about this. Because as a really quick aside, that just going through the studio the other day, it was one of the really great things that I saw for the game and the team is that he's been able to hire back a lot of the folks, like the veteran folks that had worked on the first two games.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I'm hoping that those guys have a better memory than he does. And then maybe they can help me either just give me more funny anecdotes about the Sega Saturn version, or maybe even help me track down some of the code. But that is like my kind of my holy grail when it comes to this project for sure. But he doesn't remember much about it. But I did walk him through that video that's on YouTube that shows like the Sega Saturn version, and he was surprised about how far along it looked. he was really fixated on the fact that the mirror, one of the two mirrors that Ryo has to find in the game, that it's like in like a box, like underneath the ground, as opposed to being hidden in the dojo. And he couldn't remember why that was, why that had changed. He really loved the way that the game looked. Actually, he was really impressed with how good Ryo looked, which is something that they're working on in the new game, and making sure that he looks, just like he did before, but like more rezzed up. He talked about something that I didn't know about, and maybe he's talked about previously in other interviews that I wasn't aware of, but he did mention that the Sega Saturn version, even back at that time, that there was basically two versions that they were looking to build, that they're looking to build two games, and that this was like the first half of the story, and then there was going to be a second half, kind of like what they do in like manga over here, that they'll have like a first half and a second half and separated into two books. And so then he said that consisted of the game's 11 chapters. And so I thought that was interesting that even back then that they knew that this thing wouldn't fit on one project, right?
Well, even in this demo, it looks like, and I remember seeing this years ago, and just what my first thought when I saw it years ago was like, this just looks like Virtual Cop, like the Virtual Cop engine or something like that.
Yeah,
but obviously,
right?
Much more detailed, something that is incredibly impressive for the Sega Saturn hardware, which is infamous for being just really hard to do 3D on. But it looks like there are scenes from both games, Shenmue 1 and 2, in this Sega Saturn footage.
Yeah, and that's something I was able to confirm with him again when I was kind of interviewing him for this, which was that the first kind of story that he was setting out to build was very much like the story of Shenmue, what ended up becoming Shenmue 1 and 2. But that was all going to be like one package. Even when he moved on to Dreamcast, he talked about that as being like a one game experience, which ended up having to get cut in half. And so, but post the Shenhua story that you see at the end of Shenmue 2, there really isn't much content that was built, which would, eventually, which would have been Shenmue 3. So it's interesting that he basically just had, that's the content that he was looking to build at the beginning, and that's what he was able to ship eventually on two games, but nothing else beyond that, even though we know that the game is supposed to go, far beyond that in terms of how many chapters there are, correct?
Yeah, I'm curious. I was always, always curious about why he chose to go to China with the story, or go to Hong Kong and not stay in Japan, if he was just like really fascinated with the country or just the area of Hong Kong.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question that I'll let to ask him next time. But I know he was very fascinated about China and wanted to do like a Chinese inspired epic. And that to me is a really cool idea. And he went there recently again for research for the new game. So which I was sad I wasn't able to join him for. But one of the other things he said about the Sega Saturn game I thought was interesting is he said that he kept pointing out like the quote unquote pre-rendered backgrounds. And I was like, what pre-rendered backgrounds? And he kept pointing at them. And apparently, I don't know, he says that a lot of those scenes that you're seeing have pre-rendered background. That's why it looks so good. But the camera was moving, so I wasn't quite sure how they were doing that. So that was something that I thought was kind of curious.
Wow, yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this, again, right now. It's, So yeah, who knows? Impressive, I guess.
Yeah. And then the last thing about the Sega Saturn version he basically said is that, yeah, it obviously was moved on to Dreamcast because they needed a killer title for Dreamcast, and so they moved development over to that. And as the game started to expand, the first chapter started to expand, where he's adding more scenarios and more subquests. That's when things just got out of control, and he had to split the game into half, basically.
This is like really super cool stuff, and just this whole discussion, and even looking at these things on YouTube is getting me even more excited. And thank you, YouTube, and this is a really great series. I'm sure people, if you're listening to the show, you probably checked it out. But G4 used to have a really great show called Icons.
Yeah.
And I guess it was Tech TV at the time, but there's an episode all about, I guess, Shenmue and his other previous games as well that's worth checking out. That's a really, really great series, and thankfully YouTube saved that stuff. And whoever bought Tech TV didn't destroy it. I guess G4, whoever bought G4. So I don't know. Is this maybe a spot where we should pause and we'll talk to the Patreons in a couple minutes? Does that make sense?
Let's do that.
Okay, but for everyone else, before we do wrap up, and this is a great opportunity if you do really enjoy this show, and to be honest, selfishly, this one has been an absolute blast for me. But for people out there, if you really want to help me continue to do this show, like literally $1 per episode or about $4 per month, less than I use the equivalent of a cup of coffee, but that's kind of what it is. You can help me produce these shows and continue to deliver them to you every single week and cover all the costs of bandwidth and just the time. It takes a lot of time to put all this stuff together. So I want to say thank you to all those Patreon supporters. That's why we're going to come back in a second to talk to them and do some more of the fantastic Q&A that Ryan has. But for everyone else, please make sure that you're going in and checking out Ryan's stuff at Ryan Payton on Twitter and also at Camouflage. And I made sure that I wrote down the name because I knew I was going to mess it up, but CAMOUFLAJ for Camouflage. And like you said, Republique, it's available pretty much everywhere right now. So you can go pick it up and check out that game. And that must have been just an unbelievable project for you and your team.
Oh yeah, it was our first game. It took me 4.5 years to build. 5 episodes, about 10-15 hours of story-driven gameplay. It's really took a lot out of me, but I'm incredibly proud of the game and really lucky that we had just like Shenmue had a great Kickstarter, and we've fulfilled everything that we set out to do except the damn collector's edition box, which is arriving very soon to those people who are very generous to us. Yeah, it's been like a dream project for me. I'm really happy that as a studio we live on to make game 2. Not necessarily another Republic game, but we're working on our second game, which is really exciting.
I'm looking forward to play. I pre-ordered, this is like a while back, I pre-ordered a copy on the PlayStation 4 thinking I would have a PlayStation 4 for Persona 5. Persona
Kevin,
5
you'll be getting a PlayStation 4 again. We know this.
I am absolutely getting a PlayStation 4, and there's one reason that we talked about in this show, and again, Persona 5, and again, to play the unopened copies of Republique and also Gravity Days HD collection are remastered. I have a copy of Until Dawn, which is sealed and just waiting for a place. Maybe I should buy a PlayStation 4.
Well, Kevin, you'll be getting back all that stuff that you sold off in that very sad episode with CVX, my friend.
Oh man!
Like we all know this. All your listeners know this.
Oh, look at how bad Alex has been. He has like 8,000 He bought all the PS4 remakes of all the Resident Evil games. Like, do we really need those, Alex?
It's just such a funny episode. You guys have already rebounded. It's ebb and flow. It's like a rubber band. You kind of pull it back and then you go back to where you were before, but then you just kind of go back and forth. And I'm a very flexible person, and I'm surrounded by 6 Dreamcast consoles, which is really against what I was supposed to do before. But when you have to celebrate the summer of Dreamcast, you have to buy 6 Dreamcast consoles. I guess so. Just do me a favor. Next time you think about selling off all these amazing games that you've collected, just call me and we'll talk about it. You and I got great messages like John Riccardi. Whenever I am posting about this stuff, it's like, what are you selling? What? Yeah, exactly.
How much would it cost to ship to Tokyo?
Here's the thing. I don't want it, Kevin. Me and Mark McDonald, a good friend, we've both ascended beyond the physical realm. But for folks like you, we need you guys in our lives, like John Ricciardi, like the guy at CVX, these guys, Mike Micah, these guys that are so interested in preserving the physical of it. That's important,
Yeah, and I have an extensive physical PlayStation Vita collection, which I'm one of the 3 people that have more than 2 PlayStation Vita games physical, which I'm proud of, and I have some, someone showed up with 24 N64 carts, so now I have 24 N64 games that I didn't ask for, but sometimes you need to have a copy of Pokemon Snap in your closet.
Yeah, you do. That's a good game. Kevin, this is super fun, and good job with the show, and your Patreon listeners. I know that they all really appreciate what you do, and you do a really great job. And because you stay positive, you're well informed, and your passion comes through. And I think that's really important for this show. And I think I could speak for all your listeners that you're doing a great job, and just keep it up.
I'm a firm believer. Thank you so much, Ryan. But I'm a firm believer that video games should be fun, and that you should only talk and play about video games that make you enjoy them. And like that's a weird thing with the internet today. I know we're supposed to hate everything, but I'm a firm believer that snarkiness does not need to be in every comment that we make. So
I agree. Yeah. I'm
going to continue to do my best to make that happen. But I am going to let you go, and I'm going to let the Patreon supporters, if you are getting really hyped for Shenmue, and I'll make sure that I mention this in the start of the pre of the other show, but I want to make sure that you guys know you can still do, I guess this is like a really weird term, but slacker backer stuff on for Shenmue 3. So you can still, back this game and get ready for, PlayStation 4 or the PC version of this game. Estimated delivery December 2017. So maybe, we'll continue to cross our fingers, but we'll see what happens with that stuff. But and did you say you had a special message?
Yeah, so we'll maybe just wrap up the show with a special message from Yu Suzuki to you and your listeners, and that's probably the way we'll go out.
シェンムーのファンの皆さん、ね、今日夜シェンムー3を作るために頑張ってます。これからもお願いします。Back in my place. Thank you.